Skyrim is filled with memorable characters, warriors, kings, assassins, people with clear roles, clear stories, and a clear place in the world. But then there are the others, the ones that don't quite fit, NPCs who feel out of place, not because they're poorly written, but because there's something about them that just doesn't line up. The way they act, what they know, or even just where they are, it all feels slightly off. They're not the most powerful, they're not the most important, but they're the ones you remember because you never fully understand them. And in a world as detailed as Skyrim, that kind of strangeness stands out more than anything else. Some characters in Skyrim are strange because they hide something. Others are strange because they reveal way too much. But Dervenin sits in a far more uncomfortable space. He's strange because you can't quite tell what he is at all. Found wandering the streets of solitude, muttering to himself and approaching the player with an almost desperate urgency, Dervenin feels disconnected from the world around him in a way that goes beyond eccentricity. He isn't just another odd NPC with a quirk or two. From the moment you meet him, it's clear that he's operating on a completely different wavelength, one that doesn't fully align with Skyrim's reality. At first glance, he appears harmless, just a rambling man speaking in fragmented thoughts, clearly distressed about something he struggles to explain. Skyrim has characters like this, people affected by magic, trauma, or simply the harshness of life in the province. It's easy to dismiss him as just another background figure, someone meant to add texture to the city, but then he starts talking about the Master, and that's when things begin to fall off. He doesn't explain who the Master is in any clear or grounded way. There's no proper introduction, no context that fits into the political or social structures of Solitude. Instead, his words feel disjointed, like places of a larger idea that you're not quite able to see yet. He speaks with urgency but not clarity. And yet, despite how little sense he seems to make, there's something about him that feels intentional, like he knows more than he's capable of expressing. Eventually, following his request leads you to the Blue Palace, one of the most grounded, structured locations in Skyrim. It's a place of authority, order, and political significance. And within that setting, Dervenin's presence feels even more out of place. He doesn't belong here, and yet he insists something within the palace is wrong. Not politically, not socially, but something else. Something hidden. And when you finally discover the Pelagius wing, everything shifts. Because Dervenin's strangeness suddenly makes sense, but only in a way that raises even more questions. The wing is not just a sealed-off part of the palace. It's a gateway to the mind of a long-dead emperor, twisted and reshaped by Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. And Dervenin is the one who leads you there, not as a guide in the traditional sense, but as a kind of messenger, someone caught between worlds, trying to bring attention to something no one else can see. And that's where his character becomes truly difficult to pin down. Because Dervenin isn't just a man asking for help, he's literally connected to Sheogorath. Whether he's a servant, a victim, or something in between is never really fully explained. He refers to Sheogorath as his master, but there's no clear indication of what that relationship actually entails. Is he willingly devoted? Is he being influenced? Is he even fully aware of what he's a part of? The game doesn't answer these questions until later on in the game, and that ambiguity is what makes him so strange. When you enter the mind of Pelagius, guided by Sheogorath himself, the tone shifts dramatically. The world becomes surreal, chaotic, almost dreamlike. It's a place where logic breaks down and absurdity takes over. And within that context, Dervenin's behaviour starts to feel less like madness and more like a side effect of proximity to something incomprehensible. Because how do you remain grounded when you're tied to a being like Sheogorath? How do you communicate something that doesn't follow normal rules? Dervenin's fragmented speech, his urgency, his inability to clearly explain what's wrong, it all starts to feel like the result of someone trying to translate madness into something understandable and failing. But even after the quest is completed, even after Sheogorath leaves and the Pelagius wing returns to silence, Dervenin remains. He doesn't disappear, he doesn't change, he doesn't gain clarity. He just continues, still wondering, still speaking in broken thoughts, still existing in that strange space between awareness and confusion. And that raises one final unsettling possibility. What if this is permanent? What if Der Venom isn't just someone who encountered madness, but someone who's been fundamentally altered by it? In Skyrim, encounters with Daedric princes are usually contained. You enter their realm, you complete a task, and then you leave. The effects are limited, controlled. But Der Venom feels like evidence that those boundaries aren't always as clean as they seem. That exposure to something like Sheogorath doesn't just end when the quest does. It lingers, it changes people, and in Der Venom's case, it may have left him in a state where he can no longer fully exist within the normal world. That idea is never really confirmed, but it doesn't need to be. The way he speaks, the way he moves, the way he fixates on something no one else can see, it all points to a kind of displacement. Not physical, but mental. As if part of him is still somewhere else. It's still connected to something the rest of Skyrim can't perceive. And that's what makes him stand out. Because Der Venom isn't just strange in isolation. He's strange in a way that suggests something larger. Something about the nature of Skyrim's world that isn't fully understood. He's a reminder that not everything fits neatly into the systems the game presents. That some characters aren't just written to be quirky or memorable, but to hint at something deeper, something unstable. In a city as structured as Solitude, where everything has a place and a purpose, Der Venom feels like an anomaly, a crack in the surface, a glimpse of something that doesn't belong, but exists anyway. And no matter how much you learn about him, he never fully makes sense, which is exactly why he might be the strangest NPC in all of Skyrim. Some characters in Skyrim are strange because of how they act, others because of what they represent. But Iola is strange in a way that feels deeply unsettling the longer you think about her. Not because she hides what she is, but because she's so open about it. You meet her in Markarth, a city already filled with tension and moral ambiguity. But Iola manages to stand apart even there. She isn't a political figure, she isn't part of some grand conspiracy, and she isn't even particularly important in the broader scope of the game. And yet, the moment you start interacting with her, it becomes clear that something about her is fundamentally off. Not in a chaotic or unpredictable way, but in a calm, deliberate and disturbingly rational one. Iola is a cannibal. That alone would make her notable. But Skyrim is no stranger to dark characters and violent tendencies. What makes Iola different is how she frames it. She doesn't present her actions as desperation or madness. There's no sense that she's been driven to this by circumstance. Instead, she treats cannibalism as something natural, something almost philosophical. When she speaks, there's no hesitation, no shame, no attempt to justify herself in a way that appeals to conventional morality. To her, it's simply a truth of existence that others refuse to accept. And that calm certainty is what makes her so strange. Because most characters in Skyrim, even the darker ones, operate within a recognisable moral framework. They might be cruel, power-hungry or misguided, but their actions still feel grounded in understandable motivations. Iola doesn't fit into that. She doesn't seek power in the traditional sense. She isn't trying to dominate or control everything. What she wants is participation, acceptance of her worldview, and your willingness to become part of it. That becomes clear during the Taste of Death, the quest she leads you through. At first, it seems like a typical dungeon setup. You're asked to investigate a hall that's been sealed off, with rumours of something dangerous inside. It's familiar territory, but the deeper you go, the more the tone shifts. This isn't about clearing out a threat, it's about uncovering something that's already taken root. And at the centre of it is Iola, guiding you not as companion, but as something closer to a recruiter. She doesn't force you, she doesn't threaten you. She simply presents an alternative way of thinking and waits to see if you accept it. That dynamic is rare in Skyrim. Most quests push you towards a clear outcome, with good and bad paths that are easy to distinguish. Iola's quest feels different. The choice isn't framed as heroism versus villainy. It's framed as acceptance versus rejection of something deeply uncomfortable. And the game doesn't heavily judge you either way. If you go along with her, you're rewarded. If you refuse, the quest simply ends. That neutrality makes the entire experience feel more unsettling, because it places the weight entirely on you. Iola herself remains consistent throughout. She's polite, composed, even welcoming. There's no moment where she reveals a more sinister side. No sudden shift in tone that recontextualizes her behaviour. She is exactly who she appears to be from the beginning. And that consistency makes her harder to dismiss. She's not hiding behind anything. There's no mask to pull away. What you see is what she is. And what she is doesn't fit comfortably into the world around her. Even her connection to Namira, the Daedric prince of decay and consumption, adds to this sense of dissonance. Daedric worshippers in Skyrim are often extreme, driven by obsession or depression. Iola doesn't come across that way. Her devotion feels almost casual, like it's simply an extension of her beliefs rather than something that defines her entirely. She doesn't preach Namira's will with fanatic intensity. Instead, she embodies it quietly, as if it's just a natural part of who she is. That subtlety makes her more convincing and more disturbing. But she doesn't feel like a cultist. She feels like someone who has already made up her mind. There's also something strange about how isolated her worldview is, yet how easily it could spread. She speaks as if others like her exist, as if she isn't some unique aberration but part of a hidden layer of Skyrim society. And while the game never fully explores this idea, the implication lingers. If Iola is this open about her beliefs, how many others are there who simply haven't been found? It turns her from an individual into a possibility. And that's where her strangeness becomes something more. Because Iola isn't just an odd character tucked away in a single quest. She represents a perspective that the game rarely confronts so directly. A complete rejection of the player's assumed moral position, presented without exaggeration or spectacle. There's no dramatic music, no monstrous transformation, no clear signal telling you how to feel. Just a conversation, just a choice, and a character who remains completely unchanged regardless of what you decide. In a game filled with dragons, undead armies, and world-ending threats, Iola stands out precisely because she doesn't rely on any of that. She's grounded, composed, and entirely certain of herself, in a way that few characters are. There's no chaos to her, no unpredictability, just a quiet, unwavering belief in something most players would rather not think about. And that's what makes her one of the strangest NPCs in all of Skyrim. Not because she's loud or extreme, but because she makes something deeply unnatural feel almost normal. Skyrim is a world that usually gives you answers. You meet a character, you understand their role, and by the time you walk away, you know where they fit. Even the more complex figures in the game still operate within some kind of structure, something you can piece together if you spend enough time with them. But characters like Iola and Dervenin don't follow that pattern. They don't exist to be fully understood. Iola challenges you in a very direct way. She doesn't hide what she is or soften it for you. She presents a perspective that feels completely wrong, yet disturbingly grounded. And what makes her stick isn't just what she does, it's how calmly she accepts it. There's no chaos, no instability, just uncertainty. And that uncertainty makes her harder to dismiss than any outright villain. Dervenin, on the other hand, is the opposite. He doesn't challenge your morality, he challenges your understanding. Nothing about him is clear. The way he speaks, what he knows, what he's connected to. It all feels incomplete, like you are only seeing part of something much larger. And even after you follow his story to its end, that feeling never really goes away. One is disturbingly clear, the other is impossibly unclear. And yet both of them leave the same kind of impact, because they don't resolve, they don't fit neatly into Skyrim's world, even though they're very much a part of it. They sit just slightly outside of what feels normal, close enough to interact with, but far enough away that you never fully grasp them. And that's what makes them memorable. In a game filled with dragons, war, and world-ending stakes, it's not always the biggest characters that stay with you. Sometimes it's the ones that don't quite make sense. The ones that leave questions behind instead of answers. Because long after the quests are finished, long after the dialogue ends, those are the characters you keep thinking about.